Okay, we are live, but we got to let it breathe just for a moment here. Bring on Facebook, and we shall get things cooking. Let me check my mic. I just realized that I might have a. Nope, we're good. Okay. And we're good. Welcome in, everybody. It is the aftermath episode of the Mile High Huddle podcast. I'm your host, Chad Jensen, and with me, as always, my fellow football priest. You know him, you love him, Zack Kelberman. Zack, as we had a night to sleep on how yesterday's game in LA went. Some time to see how some of the storylines have evolved and developed, specifically the injury, or shall I say, physical condition, heart condition of one Quinn Meinerz. Sean Payton did address it so briefly. He just cringes, man. Like,
Yeah.
you ask Sean Payton about an injury, and he'll let you know quickly. This is not something I talk about, but he does have to at least take the question. So, what did he say today?
Yeah, basically, Quinn Meinerz left yesterday's game after experiencing an irregular heartbeat. He was hospitalized overnight as a precautionary measure in Los Angeles. He flew back to Denver today. Sean Payton said he's going to be all right, and he thinks that he'll be good to go for Saturday's game in Detroit. But the beauty part is Quinn Meinerz is all pro caliber talent, Chad. What I was pleased with is when he left the game, Luke Wattenberg stepped up with authority, and I was very impressed by him stepping in and holding it down against a pretty tough Chargers front.
It's funny you bring that up because today, as I was reading Eric Trickle's grades article from the game, he had a mention of Wattenberg relieving Meinerz. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Here it is. He said on the subject of Wattenberg, he gave him a plus grade. You guys can go read it, but was it a great grade? No, but it was like a plus, meaning he did well. But here's what he said, Zach. There was a concern. This is Trickle writing, quote, there was a concern when Quinn Meinerz was ruled out of the game, but Wattenberg did well in his place. There was a noticeable drop-off due to how excellent Meinerz has been this season, but Wattenberg looked more than serviceable out there. So definitely an encouraging development, Zach, because, the interior depth, I mean, O-line depth in the NFL is a thing, period. But for the Broncos, specifically at the interior, that's been a concern as some of the recent moves and draft picks didn't pan out. I mean, Netani Muti no longer in Denver and all that stuff. You need Wattenberg. You need, don't brain fart the 7th round rookie out of Forsyth. You need these guys to pan out.
Yeah, I was going to say we've been begging for years for Denver to have some young offensive linemen they can build around and hopefully take over in the future. Quinn Meinerz isn't going anywhere. I mean, he's going to be the starting right guard, perennial Pro Bowl player for many years, but it's nice that Wattenberg, like Trickle said, there was a drop-off because Meinerz is playing at such a high level. I didn't expect Wattenberg to look like him, but he wasn't as bad either, Chad, as I thought he might be stepping in.
Shout out to Dylan, reminding everybody to hit the like button, share it on all platforms, subscribe if you haven't already. Really excited for some cool things coming Dylan's way that everybody in the MHH community is going to benefit from. We look forward to that exciting announcement in the not too distant future. Ronk, we got the Ronk in the house. What's up, bro? So good to see you. Hope you're doing well. It's been really cool to, Zach, I wanted to talk about this because listening to we get access to the conference calls. The Broncos PR department is kind enough to give guys like Zach and I access to these calls and participate. And it's really interesting, Zach, to see how the conversation as far as, local press, the idea, and we've been guilty of this as well. It wasn't really till yesterday that it's what I'm about to say starts kind of dawning on you and like impacting the conversation. But local press, the focus is kind of more around, hey, Sean, 5-game win streak, quick setback, but then you win another one. It's been a great 6-1 stretch, etc. How are you feel? Are you paying attention to how tight this AFC wildcard race is? And he's like, actually, no, we're focused on the division, dude. We're focused on the division. And I just love that. I mean, they've been lucky, Zach, that the Chiefs have been in a little bit of a mini slump and all that, but I love the way that has changed. That's on the table for the Broncos entering week 15 of the season.
Yeah, I mean, the Chiefs' schedule over the final quarter of the year is pretty favorable for them, but it's not out of the realm of possibility. They lose a couple more or one game and the Broncos win out. It's not a stretch to me, Chad, to say the Broncos can go at 11-6. It's definitely doable. It's not hyperbolic, excuse me. It's not homeristic to think that. And if it breaks a certain way, you might be talking about the Broncos from 1-5, from 70-20 as AFC West divisional champions. I'm so happy Sean Payton has that mindset to go for the gusto and not settle for anything less.
Big Earn, shout out to you, my friend. Good to see you. Good to see Albert in the hizzy. Give our best to your awesome wife, Michelle. Shout out to Pearl on Facebook. Michaela Israel in the house. The Ronk, of course, and of course we got some prayers up for Michaela and her little man, Coop. Just send some positive vibes their way as she talks about here in this comment. Struggling, so we're in Denver getting him the care he needs. We live in a rural community, so they don't have the same care out there. So Michaela knows that anything we can do to help, we're here to help. But our thoughts and prayers are with you and the little man, and we know that it's gonna be all right. There is one here too that I wanted to grab. Interesting topic. I saw a headline today, Zach, that the Russell Wilson celebrating 2 wins, right? Getting the victory over the Chargers, and then he and his wife Sierra having welcoming their new baby girl. I apologize to the Wilsons if I botched this. Amora Princess Wilson today. Thank you for that reminder, Mike. But yeah, kind of a nice 24-hour swing there for Russ, Zach.
And I'm sure his critics will criticize him for having his baby in season, Chad. But on a serious note, congrats to Russell Wilson, Sierra, their family. It's always a happy, wonderful time.
A couple other quick shout outs here. I see the Papa Bear, David McElrath, jumping in early. Good to see you, brother, holding down the fort. Kevin, Woofy, the early birds, David. So good to see all you guys. We have super chat here from Josh Ross jumping in early. Very appreciative. Thank you for breaking the ice tonight, Josh. He says, when we make the playoffs, coach of the year for Sean Payton. I think the offense will still improve and clean up a bit more. Go Broncos. He's definitely in that conversation, but there is some stiff competition, Zach, this year for that coveted coaching award, AP Coach of the Year. But yeah, we started talking about this, Zach, when they beating the Chiefs. It was more about kind of just celebrating the streak being snapped and getting that monkey off the back. But when they went in and then beat the Bills, we started talking about, well, hey, if this becomes a thing and they push for the playoffs and they actually make the playoffs, it's going to be hard to deny Sean Payton that award. And here we are now entering week 15, and it's very much on the table.
What's funny is the betting odds a few weeks ago were indicating that Dan Campbell in Detroit was the favorite to win Coach of the Year. And who the Broncos face on Saturday? Dan Campbell and the Lions. And if the Broncos take them down, I don't see why Sean Payton shouldn't at least be in the running. Maybe not the favorite. There's, Nick Sirianni, Shane Steichen. There are some qualified candidates for sure, but you're talking about a team that was 1-5, left for dead in the water, and they're coming back and surging late in the season to maybe push for not just a wild card, but maybe the division. You can make a case that if the Broncos do get in the playoffs, Sean Payton should win Coach of the Year, but if they win the West, it has to be Sean Payton. I mean, has to. I don't make the rules, Shed. I just enforce them.
I do want to talk about something else Josh said in his super chat. But first, guys, real quick, we got to remind you that you got to make Little Caesars, which is the official pizza sponsor of the NFL, part of your game day, just as it is here at the Jensen HQ household. We seriously, Little Caesars is part of the weekly ritual for us. On game day, sure. Middle of the week, very much so. Order online during our Pizza pregame, 1 hour before, 3 hours after NFL kickoffs, plus all day Sunday, and get ready for some football and fun. You choose your favorite Little Caesars pizza or pick the toppings you crave, and either way, you win.
I mentioned, Chad, the Broncos being on Saturday night this week facing the Lions, and ain't no one want to cook on a Saturday night. So I would suggest you get out and go get a Little Caesars pizza and watch the Broncos beat the Lions. And speaking of winning, everyone scores with convenient delivery or our in-store pizza portal pickup. So grab some friends and enjoy a few slices during the Broncos game.
What I wanted to say, and thank you, David, indeed, pizza, baby. What I wanted to say here, coming off of the Josh's super chat. Hold tight 1 second, Jeremy, or else I'm going to lose this, Scott. Hang tight 1 sec. Which is when they finally figured out, when Russ finally went, okay, it's not working with Jeudy, and started, putting the ball to the guys who were going to make the most of it. Things started moving in the third quarter and beyond. You got a glimpse of really how balanced that offense can be. It was arguably Russell Wilson's best game of the year in terms of how he maneuvered the pocket. And that's arguable. And I would hear out anyone who would try to pick nits in that particular argument. But I'm not necessarily talking, Zach, about his numbers. I'm talking about the dude having time to throw and actually mostly staying in the pocket and going through his reads and delivering the ball. And so I think there's a little bit of a model, a little bit of hope, I should say, that the Broncos might be kind of figuring some things out there. But it's really unfortunate. All the force feeding, the classic overcorrection on Jerry Jeudy just did not pan out.
Speaking of Russ, you make a really good point. Rewatching the tape from yesterday, the long touchdown to Courtland Sutton, it's amazing what happens, Chad, when Russell Wilson is protected and he steps up into the pocket, not move side to side. Best deep ball passer in the NFL, maybe in NFL history, and that was on display. I would love to see more of that downfield nature from the Broncos, but regardless of Russ's game manager role or his passing yard stats not being too overly gaudy, I mean, you're talking about a quarterback that entering week 15 or coming out of week 14, Russ ranks in the top 6 in the NFL in completion percentage, passing touchdowns, touchdown percentage, passer rating, and completions of 40 plus yards. So it goes back to a point that we've been hammering since the day he got here. If you give Russell Wilson time, good things will happen. And I have not seen a quarterback in Denver with that much time to throw the ball since Peyton Manning. It was a wonderful sight.
Dude, I wouldn't have guessed that Mike McGlinchey was going to step up and have one of his best, probably his best pass blocking day for the Broncos as a Bronco. Garrett Bowles played lights out left tackle. I mean, it's really hard to completely pitch a shutout, Zach, as a tackle, as an offensive tackle. And by shutout, I don't necessarily mean 0 sacks. I mean, that does happen on the reg if you're an above average tackle, but no hurries at all. Like, that's a perfect game. So it wasn't a perfect game in that sense statistically. Garrett Bowles did relinquish a couple of 2-3 pressures, but I don't recall Khalil Mack, Zach, being that big of a force to reckon with for Denver yesterday because the tackles played so well. Phil, appreciate you, big dog, down in Tucson. Love you. He says, really great to see the offense open up a bit, and I'm hoping to see even more as the season continues. Buck 'em, go Broncos, MHH for life. Indeed. I think, it's kind of been one of the more mysterious components to the season for the Broncos is, most people equate, you hear the word or the name Sean Payton, you equate that with a prolific offense, right? All those years in New Orleans, and it just hasn't really been prolific. The only thing the Broncos have scratched at on that side of things, prolific, that word, is the defense and what it's done from a takeaway perspective, and lately the sack rate as well for the Broncos. So it's been weird, so to speak, or a little bit not off-putting, but just different to see Sean Payton trying to figure out how to crack the code in a new city with a new quarterback and a completely new supporting cast. And I think there's a little hope here we've seen recently, Zach, that maybe he's starting to kind of figure things out, and they're starting to figure him out, specifically Russ.
Yeah, with a quarterback that was supposedly washed and irreparable. Yeah, it's funny how good coaching can make that narrative go away really quickly. You know, you mentioned Sean Payton, and you said when you think of his name, you think of a prolific offense. People also think of Bountygate with Sean Payton
Yeah.
unfairly. That's all they remember him for. They consider him a coach who the game passed him by. He doesn't have that magic anymore. But I disagree, and I'll point to one play, that Troutman touchdown against the Chargers yesterday. Sean Payton talked about that today. One of the best play designs I have seen in a Broncos game in many, many, many years. And he talked about that and said he watched the tape from last season, the Jaguars and the Chargers game, and he developed that play based on the success that Jacksonville had against the same defense, Brandon Staley. When's the last time an offensive coach in Denver has broke down the film that way, game plan that way, scheme that way, drew up a play that way? It's so refreshing, and it's more affirmation that he really is the right guy for the job.
Well said. Pardon me. Jeremy, good to see you tonight, big dog. Hope you're doing well. He says, is it possible to have the worst defense in the league and the best defense in the league in the same season? I was like making sure I wasn't reading that incorrectly. No, that's what he wrote. And yes, you go from Zach being the worst defense in the league, and not just in the league, but historically. Like what the Broncos, Nick wrote about this today in an article writing up something that NFL.com said about Vance Joseph and his crazy season. But, you know, you go from a 1-5 start, a defense that was historically bad, historically meaning they were setting the ignominious type of defensive records and distinctions that hadn't been seen in decades and in some cases ever in the NFL, to suddenly, Zach, being like the darling of the NFL relative to defense. Like Denver's defense, nobody wants to see right now. And there are some other good ones in the NFL. So there's an argument to be made, Jeremy, that the Broncos defense is not currently, as it is, the best defense. I mean, the Broncos handled them though, but still, the irony here, is it possible? Yes, it is. It is possible. We're seeing it play out.
I was going to say, you know, Cleveland, Dallas, there's a few teams, Jeremy, that would take umbrage to the Broncos being called the best defense, but there's no argument at all. They were the worst defense, and in some respects, their rushing defense, they are near the bottom still, but that's why you can't go by the box score or go by raw numbers and the data, because if you watched the Broncos yesterday, if you didn't know anything about football, or you woke up from a coma, you would say, wow, that Broncos defense is pretty damn good. They look like the aggressive nature, a lot like, not saying they are, but a lot like what we saw in 2015 under Wade Phillips. See ball, get ball, take it away, and give it back to the offense. So it's a sliding scale. The truth is always in the middle, Chad. Vance Joseph deserves a lot of credit for the turnaround, but the defense is still far from perfect. There's some areas that I would like to see cleaned up a bit more.
Hey, a quick shout out to the man, the myth, the legend, to he who fathered me. Is that a word? I mean, it's father. So, I mean,
He sired you.
he sired me, this man, Mark Jensen. Dad, love you. Good to see you tonight in the chat. This question here, Michaela, for you and the little man that Pearl's saying, anything we can do to help Cooper, you know that's an open thing, and let us know if there is something that can be done to help out. Because we definitely have concern for your little family and for the little man. So a comment here from Albert. Jerry Jeudy cost us too many points. If he catches those drop passes, you'd see a different offense yesterday, an offense that is confident in each other. Yeah, we touched on this a little bit right after the game, Zach, that, you know, those 3 big missed opportunities. And I'll give Jeudy at least one thing, which is that first one where he kind of had to readjust and reorient and track the ball. And that one was the least ideal, but that straight up go route that Russ put right in the breadbasket. I mean, if you look at the images, you saw the game, but if you just look at the images of how that ball came down, it was another great moon ball, accurately thrown. Jerry Jeudy had every opportunity in the world to go up and be a wide receiver and come down with that. And then, of course, failing, Zach, with all the space you need to get 2 toes down or 2 feet down in the end zone, he's right. You're probably talking about 17 points or so, if not actually 21, that were left on the field because of the Jeudy failure to launch.
This is why after the blow up with Steve Smith, I think it was the first Kansas City game preceded that, I was very on board with keeping Cortland Sutton and shipping away Jerry Jeudy, if only because his presence, be it on the field or off the field, is a detriment to the Broncos. And no different, by the way, than when they had Frank Clark and Randy Gregory. By the way, the Broncos are 6-1 since moving off from them. You can't move off from Jeudy yet until after the season, but I agree with what Albert's saying here. He wanted the ball. He complained about not getting the ball, and he's not catching the ball. We talked about this a week ago with, talking about why wasn't Russ not throwing to Jeudy. And I said, even if Russ targets him, can you trust him to actually catch it? And we had a YouTube comment saying, well, Judy's catch rate is better than Cortland Sutton's or comparable or whatever. But that doesn't matter when you see it with your own eyes. And like you said, Russell Wilson drops a ball into his breadbasket and you can't get both feet down. That is football 101, wide receiver 101. It's elementary, Watson. And Jerry Jeudy just can't seem to master that.
Heck yeah. Dylan says Jeudy isn't a good receiver for Russ. Jerry's about precision and timing, while Russ is about thriving outside the pocket and chaos. This is an excellent point, and it's one, Zach, that perhaps doesn't get touched on enough because you go, oh, well, a good receiver is a good receiver. Quarterback should be able to make hay with a good receiver, period, regardless of what his kind of special, how he wins, for lack of a better term. And this has been brought up a lot. I think Eric wrote about this today. The way Jeudy wins, like Dylan points out here, it's about that precision. It's about the timing. And Russell Wilson, the closest we've seen him come to being that kind of quarterback, at least this season, Zach, was yesterday. But still, it's just not how he operates. He's not Drew Brees. He's not Peyton Manning. He's not Tom Brady. If he hits the back of his foot and he's got good protection, he will hang and make his reads. But if it's a bad day at the office relative to edge pressure or interior pressure, or he's kind of feeling heat a little bit, he almost becomes he can't perceive, almost, is I guess what I'm getting at here, anything but get out of the pocket, and he keeps his eyes downfield. I don't take that away from Russ. Like, I'm not trying to throw shade at him in the way I'm describing this, but he's a creator outside the pocket. And honestly, John Elway could win from the pocket, especially later in his career as he aged. But that's what made him. You look at most of John Elway's big Hall of Fame highlights, it was big plays, Zach, being created outside the pocket. And as a wide receiver, you got to kind of either have the traits that allow you to thrive in that situation and kind of always know that your quarterback's going to be working off script a little bit. And if you don't have that natural propensity, Zach, you got to freaking find it. And Russ and Jeudy, they just, to quote, who was it? I think it was Mike Evans today, oil and water.
Yeah, I agree with the point that you're making, Dylan. It never seemed like Jerry Jeudy was a good fit for Sean Payton's system, partly for the reasons you laid out. And historically in New Orleans, Sean Payton had the Cortland Sutton types, the Marcus Colstons, the Michael Thomases. Jerry was always kind of a fish out of water. But on the other hand, I kind of compare him to Kadarius Toney in the sense that they're both immensely talented, and the obvious answer was, oh, he'll benefit from a change of scenery, going from the Giants, a losing team, to the Chiefs, a winning team. Well, the light bulb hasn't clicked on even in Kansas City for Kadarius Toney. So I do think Jeudy and the Broncos need to part ways. I do think he needs to change the scenery, but his issues are beyond catching the football or running routes. He has an attitude problem. He has a maturity problem. And no matter where you go, unless he grows up fast, those things are going to persist and hamper what he could be at the NFL level.
By the way, Sammy, I think it's Sammy. It sounds like you're raising him right. She puts, my daughter is screaming, Buckham. It's awesome. You just got to make sure she enunciates that B quite well, or else, adults around her might mistake what she's saying. Jeremy, this is a really salient point in observation as well. He says, I don't know how precise Jerry is. He's more of a dancer who does, he creates that separation, but he loses his focus at catch time, which is true. And that is one of those traits, Zach, that does separate the great NFL receivers. from the run of the mill and average guys, the Jags. And that's where Jerry's kind of dangerously floating right now, is at the Jag kind of status. But he'll run a beautiful route, create that separation, whether it's short, intermediate, or deep. And when it's the catch point, somehow, some way, something happens in his focus. And that's when you actually need to be at your highest point of focus and your highest point of execution. So it's sadly ironic.
Jeremy, I see what you're saying. I can't speak for Dylan, but I think what he was trying to intimate, there's two types of receivers, right? I mean, there's the Cortland Sutton types who, like you said, Chad, see ball, get ball, they go up and get it, their catch point, catch radius, high pointing skills, all that are elite. Then there's the other receivers like Jerry Jeudy who don't really have that ability or that want to. I could only imagine what it would look like, Chad, Jerry Jeudy going up and trying to fight for a 50-50 ball. The odds would not be in his favor. But he also thrives when he creates that separation, when he gets that space and he shows off his footwork, and he expects the ball to be right there. If not putting it on him when he makes his cut, then throwing him open. The problem is he can do all that. It's great. You can have the perfect play. You can make the perfect throw. But when the ball comes to you, you can't do these gyrations like you just demonstrated, Chad. That's not how you play receiver at the NFL level. And it wouldn't be acceptable for an undrafted free agent or a 7th-round pick. But from a guy who's a veteran now, a former 1st-round pick, at some point the light bulb has to go on. And it's kind of concerning, more than kind of concerning, that it hasn't yet.
I like what Scott says in our private chat. It's a shame that you have to say, I can only imagine what that looks like in year 4, pardon me, of Jeudy being with the Broncos. And he says, I saw him go up for a 50-50 on a deep ball yesterday, went through his arms. But see, and I would argue, I would not to be contrarian, but I would argue that wasn't a 50-50 ball because it was accurately thrown. A lot of times, like Cortland Sutton, he goes up and gets a ball that really he doesn't have any business getting. Like it's like 2 guys there hanging on him, and he finds a way to come down with it. And that one in particular, the second one that Jeudy was unable to come down with, the vertical one, that one was just a beautiful pass. Josh, this is something a lot of Broncos fans are wondering about right now, Zach. Let's answer this. We can't give a definitive answer, obviously, because we don't have a crystal ball. But he wants to know, any chance Tim Patrick makes it back next year? I mean, after all, we got to just remember 2 straight full seasons missed to injury, and they actually gave out his number this year. You had another guy, another receiver wearing 81. What's his name? The other receiver from Smith from New Orleans. Anyway, so what's your answer? Any chance?
Number one, I can only recall talking about Jeudy, him going up and getting a 50-50 ball one time. That was 2020 when Brett Rippon started that game against the Jets, and he mossed the Jets cornerback. But that's about it. So, again, that's an issue. In terms of Tim Patrick, I think, you laid it out, his injury history. I don't know what he has left or what he could contribute, but my opinion, the Broncos should do right by him, give him a chance, maybe on a reduced salary for 2024 and beyond, give him a chance to come back and prove his worth and show that he's not hampered by the injury on a full-time basis. But then again, you're keeping Cortland Sutton more than likely. I don't know what you're doing with Jerry Jeudy. You might trade him, you might not. You have Marvin Mims, who's looking like at least a wide receiver 2 of the future. As much as I love TP, I just don't know where he fits in considering the circumstances.
Yeah, it's hard to foresee. It's hard to envision the Broncos saying, yeah, come on back, Timmy. And let's hope to Sam Hill that you can stay healthy because you're set to earn $9.5 million next year. With the cap numbers, Zach, for what it's worth of $16 million. They paid him. Now, look, he did sacrifice his body and he's gone through hell trying to work back to health. So it's not like he's just been sitting on his rear end, but they've paid him a lot of money to rehab over the last couple of years. And so unfortunately, those pragmatic demands financially anyway end up coming into play. But I was thinking of Traquan Smith. He was the few snaps he's gotten when he's been elevated from the practice squad, 81. And when I saw that, I went, ooh, that's not a positive harbinger, relative to Tim Patrick's outlook. Push comes to shove. I think that if the team believes his recovery is either on schedule or ahead of schedule, or they're buying into whatever the doctors are saying, I think they maybe offer him to come back at a significantly reduced salary. So we'll see on that.
And don't forget, when TP signed his contract, that was more of a team-friendly deal than it was a player-friendly deal. And on top of that, less than a year later, like months later, if you recall, TP restructured that contract to give the Broncos a little more salary cap flexibility. So he's been good to them. The Broncos have been good to him to give him millions. But I do think, like you mentioned, him putting his body on the line, what he's contributed to the Broncos, despite the quarterback play, despite the coaching, if he can be mostly healthy, they'll give him a shot on a reduced salary to come back and hopefully get back to the pre-injury level. Fingers crossed.
We're at about 30 minutes, guys. We got to keep it a little bit tight tonight. Some things going on that I got to take care of, a family birthday party thingy. So any burning topics, supers, get them in the chat, and we will do our best to get to them before we dip out. But Elias on Facebook, what's the word on Nick Benito? Now, Zach, I don't know if you've heard anything since Sean Payton's conference call, but let me go ahead and read to you how he answered the following question. Yeah, Coach, an update on Quinn Meinerz and Nick Benito. Quote, Quinn will be back today. That's really any update we have. And then he also was like, we don't talk about injuries. I'm never going to talk about injuries. So I haven't seen, Zach, any other specific scuttlebutt about him, but at least bring people up to speed on the situation with Nick Benito.
Yeah, he had a knee injury in yesterday's game. And from my understanding, he was in a knee brace, though we don't know the severity of that injury. It sounds like it could be minor, though it also could keep him out for a week or two. Don't forget, the Broncos have a shorter week. They're flying out to Detroit on Friday, Sean Payton said, so the practice schedule will be a little condensed. As the week goes on, if Benito can be limited in practice, if he practices at all, that's a good sign for his availability. But as of right now, Monday evening, we don't know anymore.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate because even though he's kind of been a one-trick pony and more of a cleanup artist than like a true sack artist, he is leading the Broncos still in sacks. And you know what? It's easy, Zach, to say, try and take away from a guy by saying, oh, he rarely just wins off the edge. Like all those phenomenal, beautiful highlights you can probably think back in your mind's eye, Von Miller just spinning around a tackle or bull rushing a guy and getting to the queue. Nick Benito, though, you do have to hand it to him. There is a knack. Maybe I wouldn't call it a talent, but a knack. It's a little bit just this side of being a talent for guys who are going to be there to clean up those situations when the opportunity arises. So you do need that. And Baron Browning, since his return, has easily been this team's most impactful edge rusher. But for whatever reason, the production's not really coming out in the wash for Browning quite yet. He's getting a lot of pressures, and I guess that is a production in and of itself. It affects the game. It affects the quarterback. But Benito still leads the way for the sack lead for the Broncos, followed by Jonathan Cooper, and then a few other guys, kind of in the mix there.
I think the best way to look at it is Baron Browning is doing the dirty work, and Nick Benito is benefiting from that dirty work. And though, Benito, if the Broncos were to play without him, it's not like not having Surtain or Justin Simmons, but Benito, the Broncos are a better defense with him on the field than with him not on the field. So again, fingers crossed that he'll be okay.
That's one of those things, guys, that, like you hear us say on the show often, we don't believe in coincidences. Well, look, it's no coincidence that the Broncos defensively reached critical mass right when Baron Browning returned from injury. So, Mike, the Ronk, we appreciate you, brother. Thank you for the support, the stars, the contributions to the community, and just everything you bring to MHH, my friend. We love you. We appreciate you. This is a question I also want to grab. Josh threw down a super chat also earlier tonight. So this is, I think, number 3 for him. So good for you, big dog. Do you think PJ Locke gets the start when Kareem is back? And this is interesting, Zach, because Sean Payton was specifically asked this question earlier today in the conference call. And let me just read to you, Zach, what he said. It was more a question that was postured like this. Hey, is it going to be a challenge to figure out how to get PJ Locke and Jackson on the field when Kareem returns? Yeah. He said, quote, It's a good problem to have. It seems like it's still a ways away yet. In other words, deciding what to do there. We'll have to deal with it when it gets here. But I think you bring up a couple good points. Certainly, we've noticed how he's been playing PJ, close quote. So what is your prediction, Zach, for when Kareem returns?
I'm putting aside my bias and I've resigned myself to what Kareem Jackson is. And I understand the utility for a Kareem Jackson. I understand why the coaches and the players love him, yada, yada. But this is where it bothers me. They're going to galaxy brain themselves into figuring out how to get Kareem Jackson on the field when, if you look at the tape and watch the game flow, I hate to break the cold hard truth here, but the Broncos defense is better with PJ Locke at safety than with Kareem Jackson at safety. PJ Locke is a better blitzer. He's better in coverage. He doesn't cost the Broncos in stupid penalties like Kareem Jackson does. He doesn't have that reputation, so the referees won't be, zooming in on him and focusing on him. To me, if I was Vance or the defensive staff, it'd be no question at all. They brought back Kareem in the first place to be a backup or a mentor to Caden Stearns and the younger safeties. Stearns' injury kind of precipitated Kareem starting again, but now you have your young bull. You have your Caden Stearns and PJ Locke. So revert KJ to what he was supposed to be, and that's third string. I promise the drop-off will not happen.
Yeah, this is a good question here from Scott. How many games has Kareem been out, and what is Denver's record with him while he's been suspended? And we could do that arithmetic if we want, but I think that was the third game of the new 4, or am I misremembering that? Oh, he's telling me 3. Oh, Scott's got it. So the Broncos are 3-5 when he's on the field, 4-1 when he's not. Now,
case closed.
A coach that is as nuance driven as Sean Payton is, that's not going to escape him, nor will it the staff. So what I think you see happen is it's quite clear. PJ Locke stays on the field and does what he does. Doesn't mean you don't use Kareem, but you are not taking PJ Locke off the field. And, there are some imperfections to Locke's game, the same kind of imperfections you expect to see of a relatively still young guy in the experience department. But any slight lapse he might have, like on a given coverage, or he doesn't play the zone quite right or whatever, he makes up for, Zach, in the form of high impact plays in opportune moments that affect the game.
Yeah, and you can look at data or analytics, or you can scratch your head until it starts to chafe, Chad. But if you just watch the Broncos defense, if you do cut-ups and watch the defense with Kareem Jackson and with PJ Locke, I mean, it's glaring. It's not even subtle. It's glaring that they are better with a more athletic, younger, position flexible safety in PJ Locke. I really hope he continues to start and the Broncos don't overthink this by forcing Kareem on the field just to play him.
Yeah, think of it like this. Kareem and Randy Gregory gone. They're out, right? And then you get Browning and Locke in. We say it all the time on this show. We don't believe in coincidence. KB, good to see you, big dog. He says, it's nice to see Will Lutz steady himself over the year. Yes, indeed. And I think it's been vastly more, though, Kenny, just steady. He had a little bit of a unsettling first game, a little inconsistent, right? But from then on out, he's been pretty dang clutch, dude. Like, very, very impressed by what I've seen from Will Lutz. And also, Zach, it's really refreshing to have a coaching staff in place that doesn't give in to the tantrums thrown by a kicker who wants to try from 70 and doesn't make it, wants to try from 68, doesn't make it, wants to try from 65, doesn't make it. So not to say that maybe Lutz hasn't campaigned. I don't know that for sure, but they take the points that are there. They take the opportunities, Zach, for what they are. And I like that.
It's also nice for your NFLPA rep to not be your kicker, like in the case of Brandon McManus. But if you look at the stats, I actually had an article last Friday that Broncos special teams coordinator Ben Kotwika said that Will Lutz absolutely should be in the conversation for the Pro Bowl. And he talked about there's other good kickers in the conference, Harrison Butker he named. But I was looking at the leading vote getter at the time when I wrote that article, and it was Dustin Hopkins in Cleveland. And at that time, Will Lutz had a higher field goal percentage than Dustin Hopkins. So there is definitely a case to be made. And I want to just give him his credit. He's 92.9% Will Lutz's on field goals this season. Brandon McManus in Jacksonville is at 85.7%. So a lot of people, Chad, knocked Sean Payton for bringing in one of his guys and Will Lutz, but he has the last laugh. It turned out to be a really good move.
And that 7 points percentage swing does affect you in the standings, because oftentimes the kickers come in, and if it's a missed kick in the first quarter, it comes out in the wash when the chips are down in the fourth. If it's a game sealing kick and he misses it, obviously, it comes out in the wash. So well said. Taylor, brother, thank you for the super chat. So good to see you. So do you think Sutton, the one-handed catch, his one-handed catch was the play of the year? Zach, what do you think?
No, but I think another Courtland Sutton play is the play of the year, and that was his touchdown against the Bills, which was, according to NFL's Next Gen Stats, I wrote about it at the time, the most improbable completion of the Next Gen era. It had a 3.2% completion probability. The throw to Courtland Sutton yesterday, though beautiful, had a probability of about 21.9. So great play, but if there is... Exactly. I agree with the comment Scott's saying here. I don't think it was even Sutton's best catch. If there is a catch of the year, it's the one against Buffalo. That is still outstanding.
Phil jumping in, is Greg Dulcich available this week? We need to draft a tight end. Kind of dovetails with Keith. Good to see you, Keith. How would you rate Troutman's production as he bridged the gap until Dulcich is able to return? So those two subjects, let's tie them together. Zach, he got put back on IR what week? Well, let me do the math real quick. Hold on. While I'm doing that, talk about Dulcich, outlook, Troutman, etc.
Like 7 or 8, wasn't it? I mean, I would love the Broncos. That was my takeaway from the Houston loss, is that they are dying for an impact tight end, someone dynamic at that position to stretch the seams and give Russell Wilson a safety blanket like he kind of had in Seattle. I'm not the biggest Troutman fan, though. Like Kareem Jackson, I understand the utility of an Adam Troutman, someone that Sean Payton trusts, someone that could catch a pass if it's thrown to him. And to their credit, collectively, the touchdown they drew up yesterday where Troutman was wide open was a thing of beauty. But if Dulcich could perform, it would make the offense even better. But he's Jake Butt 2.0, Chad, in the sense that all the talent in the world, yet you can't help the team when you're constantly on the sideline. I'd like to see him shake these hamstring injuries, but then I wonder, is he going to be the next KJ Hamler and just never get over them?
Yeah, it's definitely a concern, especially being traumatized by the Jake Butt situation. But here's what we know. As Scott says, Dulcich hasn't even started practicing yet. All right. Why does that matter? Well, the last game he participated in was the loss in Kansas City. And I'm pretty sure that's 7 games ago. So he has to miss one more week for sure, I believe, until he can even be considered to bring up. And I'm not sure exactly when the Broncos, Zach, plan on starting his clock. We do know that it's something they're probably going to at least take a stab at, though. And it could end up being a saving grace if that hamstring holds up. You get that impact kind of player in your passing game for these last couple, 2-3 games. You end up in the playoffs. That can really come out and help you, because no tape really for teams, or at least not that much anyway, on Dulcich, Payton, Wilson, that whole how he's used.
He's still working off to the side, Greg Dulcich, and this is my guess, my opinion. I kind of feel like he lost the trust of Sean Payton, and he lost the trust of the Broncos coaching staff. They got him back from the hamstring injury. They got him back on time, and what did he do? He re-aggravated it and went back on IR. I don't know that Denver wants to get burned again with Greg Dulcich, so they're going to keep him off the field until he's 1,000% ready to come back. When that will be, we'll have to wait and see.
Guys, great conversation. We got a couple messages for you. Then we're going to dip out, so don't leave quite yet.
Tremendous aftermath installment of the Mile High Huddle podcast. If you're not doing so, please give us a follow on X/Twitter at the MHH Pod. You can follow the main account at Mile High Huddle, Chad at Chad and Jensen, myself at Kelberman NFL, and Scott, our producer, at Scout Kennedy. If you guys want some merch, check out mhhmerch.com and get you some. If you haven't, drop us a like at facebook.com/Mile High Huddle Pod. You can find us on Instagram at mile_high_huddle. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, make sure you're leaving your football priest a 5-star review for a chance to win some of that merch each and every single month. But if anything, please heed my words. Subscribe, like, and share this video and every video you see on the MHH channel. It really helps us grow and reach more Broncos fans just like you.
A shout out to these great Super Chat superstars and supporters tonight. Before I get to the shout out, though, Kendrick jumping in. Thank you, brother, for the Super Chat. And I got to tell you guys, every single nickel that this community puts into the pot, so to speak, to MHH, we don't take it for granted. We appreciate it. It all comes out in the wash and helps us a lot. We say, Mike sometimes come off as a little cheeky, helping us keep the lights on. You are helping us keep the lights on. So Kendrick and everyone I'm going to name here in just a moment, thank you. We love you. We really, really, really appreciate you. Kendrick says, my guys, how you feeling going into week 15? Every game feels like the playoffs to me, but I love it. MHH for life. Go Broncos. State of being. Indeed, that's just the vibe when you get down the stretch and you're a competitively relevant team. Zach, is that every game kind of takes on the vibe of a playoff game, but it's especially apt and true for a team that burned all of its margin for error by starting 1-5. So I'm feeling good. One of the interesting components to this week 15 tilt is it's kind of the pupil going up against the master, so to speak, and the fact that Sean Payton and Dan Campbell have a long history. I mean, but as a coach player and then as a coach and assistant and all that stuff, they're close friends. So there will be those vibes, and it will be interesting to see if, they can, it'll be interesting to see if Campbell is at all kind of impacted. I doubt it. He doesn't strike me as the kind of guy that would be, but you never know these type of things. That's kind of not intimidated, but what's a good word for it? Just kind of taking off his game a little bit by going, I'm going against Master Splinter, this week, and maybe overthinking things or this and that. So, but I do feel good about it. Obviously our predictions, Zach, will come in on Friday in the Mile High Roundtable, but I'm feeling good about your Denver Broncos.
I don't blame you, Kendrick, for it feeling like a playoff game because it pretty much is. The Broncos, if there is room for error, a margin for error, it would be to drop a game to an NFC opponent. But right now, according to the New York Times playoff simulator, the Broncos have a 51% shot of getting into the postseason. If they beat Detroit, those odds go to, I think, 73%. If they lose to Detroit, those odds plummet to in the 30s. This is a major mile marker for Sean Payton. It's not a crappy team. This is not going to be a gimme. It's a primetime game against a 9-4 Detroit squad who is very beatable. I want to see what the Broncos can, which Broncos team shows up, Chad. The Broncos team we saw in the first quarter of the season or kind of against Houston, or the one that took it to Los Angeles, took it to Kansas City, took it to Buffalo, took it to Cleveland, took it to the Packers, and so on and so forth.
Hey, we're going to be there for it. You love to see it. This game matters just as much as I love seeing the meet the parents conversation going on in the chat right now about, milking cats. And do you drive a green car, Greg? No. Oh, because, people, they say drive a green car, it's the mark of a genius. Shout out to you guys for bringing that up. But another especially salient shout out to our great Super Chat superstars and supporters tonight: Kendrick, Taylor, Kenny, Josh on Facebook, Phil, and the Ronk throwing down. Love you guys so much. Thank you. We'll be back, of course, Thursday to break down and preview the Lions game with a head-to-head, and we'll see what kind of news breaks between now and then. But don't forget, you got Broncos for breakfast on the Bright tomorrow, followed by Building the Broncos, Mile High Insiders Wednesday. We're back Thursday. Have a great start to your week, and we'll see you then.
Enjoy the rest of your Victory Monday, everyone. We'll see you Thursday night. Take care, and as always, go Broncos.